Hey guys, this is going to be a multi-purpose video. I wanted to do a build guide video, but the build is not really performing well enough to recommend. So in addition to talking about the build, I also want to at first talk about how I'm sustaining 2 specters and they're not dying, and how you can do that as well. It may not work for every build, and there is like a different approach. Like in the last video I talked about zombie loop and falling zombie loop and how you can create that loop, but at that point I didn't really have many ideas how to actually use it in practice. But now I am using one of those loops in practice, sort of. So I'm going to talk about how the specters are not dying and how they are surviving. I haven't been doing juiced up like tier 16 maps that much, but I have never really seen them drop quarter of their life. And this is not a minion build, this is a Herald of Thunder combined with the Herald of Ice, Omniscience stacking, triple elemental damage stuff. I'm gonna talk about that later. So I don't have minion passives or minion items. What I'm doing is, since Herald of Thunder builds use Storm Secret Ring, they damage a player when Herald of Thunder hits an enemy. And that damage can be used for cast when damage taken. And with cast when damage taken, I linked zombies. Just level 1 zombies, it doesn't matter what level. It doesn't even matter if they have Blessed Rebirth or not. The reason for that is that zombies count as your minions have been killed recently. Each zombie counts as it being killed when it dies. So you can actually use the Minion Defense Mastery. Minions recover 5% of life on minion death. Maybe it does have some kind of big AoE, but all of your minions will recover 5% of their own life on any minion death. So you just create a loop where zombies just keep dying, keep falling, keep dying, and every time they do that, they also heal all of your other minions for 5% of their life. Now, I understand that you kind of have to use a Herald of Thunder, you have to have Shockton and Storm Secret Ring, so this wouldn't really be very usable for most builds. However, you can sort of do similar thing and even actually better automation, more consistent automation by just using idea from this and just set up hardbound loop rings, maybe 2 of them. You kind of have to have low physical mitigation and just set up falling zombies on their own loop, like they loop themselves. And you would have 2 zombies fall per second, and that means 10% of all the minion HP per second healed. Now, in addition to that, I am using this Crybaby Oak, which does have a Vitality Aura, which is actually providing 253 life regen per second. As I understand, the aura levels that some of these specters provide are kind of insane. For example, I believe this Kuduko is providing like level 38 Wrath. And I believe Oak is also providing 38 level Vitality. Not 28, 38, so which is kind of nuts. I feel like many builds could benefit from squeezing in at least 2, maybe even 3, if you just anoint this one, specters, because there are so many powerful specters. Like for example, this Kuduko provides, normally you only get a modifier for lighting like this one. Lighting damage with non-critical strike is lucky. However, this Kuduko, it appears it provides just your lighting damage is like including critical. I'm not entirely sure, but it should also work with criticals. In addition to that, it also provides, like I said, level 38 Wrap Aura. Like, that's insane. It gives like 28% more lighting spell damage. So I am running Herald of Thunder build, and I wanted, this is non-crit, so I also wanted lucky damage, but I am using Omniscience amulet, so I cannot really use the amulet that gives lucky damage. And my best bet is basically to use this Spectre. This is like an experimental build. I wasn't sure if I could make those Spectres tanky enough, and they appear to be tanky enough. And that's one of the reasons why I'm using this Oak, which is called Perfect Warlord. And then Perfect Spirit of Fortune for the Wrath and Lucky Lighting. Now, Oak provides Vitality. However, this Oak constantly keeps healing himself. Whenever he uses Enduring Cry, I believe he heals himself for 40% of his life. In addition to that, he shares Endurance Charges with allies, so including me and all the other minions. And Endurance Charges provide physical mitigation, and also he taunts. He taunts other enemies with the Enduring Cry, as I understand. He also uses Immortal Call, but that's only for himself. And yeah, my Spectres pretty much don't die. I am linking level 21 raised Spectres linked to Meat Shield, Minion Life, and yeah, that's it. You could link it with like Empower to raise its level a bit more, to give them a bit more life, but my Spectres are level 72. I wish I was able to tell how much life they have, but the path of building does not have these specters. I had to use custom modifiers to simulate their auras. By the way, this perfect warlord costs around 1 divine. I think the price is going up because of its defensive capabilities. It also only provides 3 endurance charges, no more than that. Actually, what if you link it with spell cascade? Sorry, by spell. Oh wait, I'm using spell cascade. I meant spell echo and I bought spell cascade. Okay, what about now? I mean, normally Enduring Cry is not a spell, so it would not link to spell echo, but oh. Now he is casting Enduring Cry once, but he is casting Immortal Call twice. 1, 2, and then Enduring Cry. Okay, so he's not War Crying twice with Spell Echo, but he is Immortal Calling twice, which is probably pointless. Either way, with the Hardbound Loop Rings, it would be a bit less tanky, I guess, approach, because you cannot really get physical mitigation if you want to maintain the loop unless you add some other shenanigans. At that point, it's kind of already turning into almost a full loop build, and most builds may not want to do that, but if you are able to do that, which would allow you to squeeze in extra like 3 specters onto your build, that could mean getting at least 30% more DPS for your build. If you want like 2 DPS specters, you could get close to 100% more DPS or 100% increased DPS. But yeah, I don't know. I'm still thinking about this idea, how else to use and what other builds could use it. I have a couple other ideas, but this is like the first build that I use in practice for this kind of loop. Now about this build, I actually have done a lot of Herald of Thunder builds in the past. The first one that I posted video was 2018, so that's like more than 5 years ago. And Herald of Thunder builds seem to be pretty popular. They're doing well, except this one for some reason. And each time I try to come up with some different approach. I'm not trying to just repeat the same process, but trying to figure out something new. The last time I did Chieftain Herald of Thunder build, and I used Chieftain Explosions, because normally you have to go with Impulsa, and Impulsa, I don't know, a couple of years ago got slightly reworked, and the explosions just look so boring and not interesting, not cool anymore. So I've been thinking what else to do, how else to get explosions. There are a couple other ways. Chieftain was one of the ways. I'm not gonna go into details about what kind of explosions you can do, but this time I decided to go with the old way of playing Auto Bomber. Back in the day when we didn't have these rings and we didn't have Lone Messenger, you were pretty much forced to play Herald of Thunder plus Herald of Ice. So Herald of Thunder itself cannot proc shock, so something else has to proc shock. I have cast and damage taken to proc Crackling Lines, which also gives plus 10 to maximum shock. Did I mention this build also has 85 shock on any boss? So yeah, that, I'm stacking minimum shock as well. And because of that, Galvanic Field also does quite a bit of damage. But back to the point, which was... right, so back in the old days, okay, so Herald of Thunder cannot proc shock, but it can still proc freeze, and if it freezes enemies, then you can also shatter all the enemies with the Herald of Ice. So if you scale like generic damage, elemental damage, and that's why Annihilating Light works so well for this, because you just get triple damage for elemental skills. Because Heralds are not spells, so we don't scale with spell damage and we don't scale with attack damage. And then Herald of Ice can actually shock enemies, so it kind of reprocs the Herald of Thunder, and Herald of Thunder reprocs Herald of Ice. If I did this build any other league, this would be an okay and pretty decent map farming build. However, this league, when you juice up with the Wisps, all the enemies become so tanky and so dangerous that this build just doesn't really feel good enough. The Herald of Thunder takes too long to... like, it keeps striking different enemy, and if there is a big enemy pack that are all tanky, it keeps striking different target, and it takes a long time for something to die, to explode, and to kind of chain explode. And then again, the chain explosions don't always happen because the enemies are just too tanky for Herald of Ice to kill them. So this build kind of only works if you don't juice up with the Wildwood. By the way, this is also Omniscience stacking, and I do have almost 1,900 Omniscience, because I'm using double elements, lighting and cold. So this works really well, and I did a pure build like that in the past, which was like almost 2 years ago, actually almost exactly 2 years ago. Omniscience stacking Herald of Thunder, and I was using that stuff as well, but it was pure Herald of Thunder with Impulse, I believe. This kind of approach gives you a bit maybe more flexibility. You can have a bit more life than normally, because you just use Utula. You use so many uniques that don't have any life, like these rings don't have any life, and it's also cheaper when you don't need to get life on gear. and that allows you to just get more attributes. And getting attributes, getting Omniscience also mean resistances. So it kind of helps you cover the drawback of this stuff, which is 60% reduced elemental resistances. So actually capping resistances was a bit of a challenge, but with charms that gave you and nearby allies have all elemental resistances, that was quite easy. And like I said, I am stacking minimum shock. I got 3 charms plus the jewel with the minimum shock, and another 20% maximum shock again. You also need to raise your maximum shock with the minimum shock. So another 20% is coming from quality 20 crackling lines of disintegration, which is basically just a beam. So as you can see, like combined damage is 8.3 million, but it's very squishy. This is with Immortal Call active currently, so without it, it would be a lot squishier. And I knew that it's gonna be squishy, but usually it's fine if you can just blast through enemies. We just explode, chain explode, and they don't really pose much danger. However, this league, enemies just become too juicy, too tanky, too dangerous, and it just doesn't quite work. I'm gonna leave as always path for building import code in the description, and I'm not sure if I even should be talking about like all the details of this build, but essentially this is Scion, Elementalist, and Raider, but I'm not sure about Raider. I wanted the Onslaught, I wanted like better movement speed just to zoom through maps, and the frenzy charges also give damage, but while mapping it doesn't really ramp up on its own that much because rare enemies don't happen that often, and when they do, they usually just die very quickly, or they don't die at all, sort of. I'm also using Impossible Escape to pick up this one, and then that one because you damage yourself, so you get endurance charges when you do that, and also Anointed this one for more attributes. I did plan on going like here, picking up more life, but if I were to continue improving this build, I would just drop all this part and would get these life nodes instead. Maybe pick up this one. You would have a bit more damage, more resistances, more life. Then I got Brutal Restraint only because I found a cheap one that has 4 good modifiers. So 5% dexterity, 4% life, another 5% dex, and then 20% elemental damage. And I took this to make minions tanky. You do need some kind of minion defense mastery, and these were the closest points, and they are pretty nice. They get 30% block and also 2% life on block. Whenever you do non-crit Herald of Thunder, you take Elemental Overload and you get medium cluster jewels like this to give them base critical strike chance, because Heralds don't really have base critical strike chance, so you need to get them base critical chance to even be able to crit. And this crit chance is, by the way, with the Bottle Fate. The Bottle Fate is essentially giving a bit of damage and also giving you crit chance to proc Elemental Overload. And then, because I got 85% shock, which is by the way automatically calculated with the minimum shock, Galvanic Field also does quite a bit of damage. As you can see, Galvanic Field has 4 million DPS, and that's only on a falling. Now this isn't a very cheap build, and I would probably not recommend this build, so I'm just probably gonna leave it at that. It's not really worth talking more about this build, and I think adding Spectres is worth it. Like, look at how much damage I would lose if I lost the Lucky Lighting. So this is 8.1 million, and if I do this, 6.9 million. It lost like 1.2 million DPS combined. Now this DPS is enough for like a tier 16 Guardians, but if they are juiced up, it's just not pleasant. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, for this build. I have another build already work in progress. It's gonna be something similar, something that I have done in the past. It's gonna be Inquisitor, a Herald of Ice focus. It's gonna have massive AoE Herald of Ice, and my expectation is that it's gonna chain explode all the enemies. It's gonna have good damage, average hit damage per Herald of Ice explosion, but the explosion AoE is gonna be 4 meters. Now to show, this Herald of Ice only has 1.9 meters, so imagine more than twice bigger. Yeah, the next video is gonna be about that. I'm not sure if it's gonna be a success or not. But for now, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.